Jordan, let's get right into it. You've been working in CPG since 2017, and since then the retail media space has seen quite a boom, and it's become one of the most important advertising channels by now. Can you explain why we've seen this remarkable development? Why is there so much growth in retail media?
Yeah, absolutely. The gorilla in the room is the retailers right now have the power to demand it. It causes a lot of frustration to the brand side, because if we look at it as purely a media product, the dollar investment has preceded and outweighed the product quality to date. But if we take a step back further, I think the more macro dynamics happening here, it's consumer behavior driven. The consumer is driving the brand's advertising dollars here because they're making more purchase decisions in the digital format. Therefore, brands have a vested interest to be there. And in the past, the same concept led brands to say, I want more points of distribution. I want in-store displays. Those drive ROIs for me because that's where the consumer's making their decision. Now that's shifting, and that's moving a bit more into a digital realm. And the other piece is, when that happens, somebody's got to foot the bill for, now we need somebody to pick, pack, and ship. Now we need somebody to get that thing off the shelf. Maybe we need an Instacart shopper. There are added costs that come into play, and somebody's got to cover it. Right now, it's the brands.
To what extent would you say this is also supply driven? What I mean with that is, even if brands had wanted to let's say, be present at the point of sale and advertise where people shop on retail platforms, a couple of years ago, this was simply not feasible. I mean, Walmart started pretty late. Amazon was quite early. The whole rest of the market followed. So it's just now that you can do this. So to what extent is it demand driven, so we want to advertise, and to what extent is, okay, now something is available that wasn't there before?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It really is something that it wasn't on our radars before as media buyers, that you could go and place your ads with any level of sophistication on the retail sites. I think it's been there for a while, that you can partner with a site merchandiser or a buyer, and they can almost hand place something there for a period of time. You get no reporting, no idea what it did to your business, who saw it, if anybody. There wasn't any sophistication there. So I think you're absolutely right. It's something new, and now we're reacting to it.
I mean, also to some extent, it seems that brands are just desperate to get a direct contact to the consumer, right? Before, when you sold in physical retail, the consumer was very, very far away, so you had basically little influence. Today, you can somehow influence this. You could also do it in a DTC way. However, it's turned out to be fairly difficult, having a very narrow range. So it seems that it's just the only way to get in touch, or to actually influence what's happening on the point of sale. I have a question on, I'm picking up what Mark just mentioned, my chat with Scott Galloway a couple of years ago. So when we talked about Amazon's push for advertising, Scott had a talk at our conference. So he already predicted that Amazon would get to the 20 billion in monetization. And when I asked him about that, is it an opportunity? He immediately said, no, it's clearly a sales tax. So he painted a pretty dark picture for the brands. And in his opinion, it was just taking away profits from the brands and capturing it on Amazon's side. To what extent do you feel the whole retail media play is a necessary evil, and to what extent is it an opportunity to drive sales and differentiate the business?
Yeah, the necessary evil language is a bit unnerving, but I don't think totally inaccurate. If we think about, I mentioned earlier, there's a need to offset the cost of e-commerce. that just has to come from somewhere. And in partnership, brands are leaning in and helping to fund some of that by buying data. And we talked a couple of times about, from the retail side, why it has to happen. And then if I think about from a brand side, it's still necessary, but it's generally a more effective way to spend trade versus pure margin or cost subsidization. You're at least getting something for it. If I flip and think about, is there opportunity here, or is this just purely a tax? I think about what this channel is. In some places, it's another distribution channel. If we think about, you can be buying space. How much would you be willing to pay for another point of distribution at Walmart?
Yeah,
you can go buy that.
Interesting perspective, Jordan, is, I mean, it's probably pretty clear that there's a opportunity if you take the brands and their competition on Amazon, because the ones who are doing this, who are executing this better, who are better at measuring the impact, who are better at allocating the ad dollars, will outperform the ones who are not as good at this. However, at the same time, let's just put a plain assumption in place. Would everyone do it equally well? Then it's just profits going into Amazon's pockets, and nobody would have a comparative advantage, right? And I think that's kind of...
Yeah, and I think there's opportunity in there when you touched on, right? We're trying to, can we do this better and faster than our competition today? Great. How long will that advantage last? Who knows today how long until everybody gets to a similar understanding of the marketplace. What we do know is right now, acquiring customers and digital purchases is extremely sticky. And I've been a part of a brand before that has dealt with a one product company. That's tough to unseat on Amazon. You can do it now and invest and see this as, I can acquire folks as they start adopting more of this digital purchase behavior. You can wait. It's going to be more expensive to do it 5 years from now.
John, I have a similar, or let's say a related question to this. Just very recently, I read some LinkedIn post from somebody, and it kind of said, hey, there's a rule of thumb for brands selling on Amazon. And it said 1/3 of your net sales price is COGS. 1/3 is now Amazon fees, including the so-called Scott Galloway sales tax, and 1/3 is profit. Let's play mind games now. Amazon a few years ago was at a less than 5 billion monetization. Now they're at over 20 billion. So there are 15 billion that came in addition. What implications does this have on how brands that sell through Amazon or any other marketplace e-commerce platform, how they can protect their margins?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and something that comes up if you dive really deep into the economics of how this works. There's a lot of times you go down the rabbit hole and you come up for air and you say, hey, we can't afford to do this. In the way it's currently working, it doesn't work. Now, there's a couple of things brands can do to counteract or to exist profitably in the space. I think first and foremost, you see a lot of brands already acting on this is portfolio management. It's what are you promoting? What are you putting out into this space? And are your retails high enough to sustain $3, $5, $10 CPAs? Can you function that way, knowing that that is now part of your cost? The other, from a pure media lens, you could look at this as the Amazon marketing spend does not only drive ROI at Amazon. So same with Walmart, same with Target. You can draw those lines now, which you could never draw before, of this ad led to this, led to this. And we have a lot of marketers starting to draw the lines and getting really concerned. What
secondary effects are you seeing?
So, right, if you think about, I'm starting with, let's say Target, round out, and I'm running money through their platform, but I'm using it to buy display on the open web. Maybe that person converts at Target, maybe they convert at Walmart, maybe they buy at Kroger, maybe they buy at Amazon. It's not all, but when you pull it into the P&L, it's not going to look good because only maybe 10% of it happened at Target.
And let's talk specifically about sponsored products that are not like really brand building. It's transactional by nature. Do you see also secondary effects of this?
I do. I still think there is some, to my earlier point of like stickiness. Once you get somebody used to consuming your products, you get somebody into the brand, the momentum's there to continue and stay with your brand. It happens more than once.
So basically what you're saying is there's a customer lifetime value attached. If
right.
you get people to purchase your product on Amazon, they will buy eventually directly from you. They will buy in whatever, brick and mortar businesses. They just stick to the brand. Question on this, is there any possibility for a brand to identify true new to file customers they acquire? I mean, yes, new customers on Amazon, that's something I could somehow still imagine, but across all the different channels, how would a brand do that?
I haven't seen a really, really good solution to that yet. I think the way brands are going to function is they're going to make some assumptions that are directionally right in lifetime value, and they'll run after it. Where brands will struggle is if they try to solve all the way down to the final decimal exactly what that answer is. You can't get there today without a ton of participation in clean room, things like that, it just doesn't have enough scale today to do it consistently and on a big enough platform for a J&J or other major brands.
Seems to be quite compelling if you think about like conquering competitor brand searches or something, because that's where you take market share away, right? Because that's usually the folks who have bought competitor products. Let's shift gears and talk about opportunities and not threats and potential downsides. How can a brand really benefit from retail media? What does a brand need to do?
Yeah, I think we talked a little bit earlier about proximity to the point of sale or proximity to the decision. And first and foremost, that is, I'll quote quotation marks, the easiest place, the first place that I'd recommend brands go to start extracting value out of retail media. So that inventory you couldn't buy before, that is close to the consumer's point of decision. If I'm thinking about, it's Halloween right now, right? And obviously I've passed with Hershey. If I'm thinking about how valuable is it to be on e-commerce, e-retail sites right now, front and center, knowing that a lot of those visits are Halloween related. It's incredible. I don't necessarily need to be on ESPN or Yahoo right now when somebody's not in a shopping mindset. There's a lot of value in buying that inventory right now. Once you talk about how do you leverage the data in a more marketplace setting, you're talking about the reduction of waste or the increase of effectiveness. If I've got a brand that plays in a category, or maybe I'll stay in food for a minute, if I've got some really polarizing flavors and I can use retail purchase-based targeting to identify who is immediately turned off by that and not market to them, I can drive ROI gains for my brand because I'm reducing my waste, I'm increasing my reach inside of somebody who might buy my product. And then the third piece, I think somewhat related to on-site display that we talked about, is search. I said it off the top. Retail search is distribution right now. If you're planning to acquire share in the coming years, you need to have a higher share on the digital shelf than you have in brick and mortar. If you're not preparing to invest in that and go take that opportunity right now, you're probably going to get beat.
What's the secret recipe for a brand to really gain a competitive advantage? Speed,
I think, is one of the things that I consistently see differentiating those that are really good at this, or starting to get good at this, I should say, and those who are kind of treading water in the retail media space is this is an immature space, right? Retail media, where search, you talked about it up front. This has really existed for in 3 years, maybe 4, with significant scale. Those that have gotten ahead have gotten there because they've made bets with 65-70% certainty. We think this is the right direction to go. We're going to go try it. That's one thing. It's a common characteristic of brands that are advanced in retail media and retail search. Another is discipline. See a lot. Products are flying out of these retail media providers faster than they can be properly evaluated. The brands that are really strong in retail media are willing to let their competitors be known for the new thing while they hone, let's say, retail search. It's not shiny, it's not flashy, it's not the TV wall, it's not the front end display, but it's what drives your business. So those that can really kind of focus in on the things that matter, their business health, I think have a lead.
When I take a look at the car market and I talk to the retailer side, what I'm realizing is that due to the fact that this whole thing was growing that fast and there's so much demand now coming in, they are all running out of inventory. Maybe except for Amazon, because they have sponsored products all over the place. But the vast majority of the others, they have limited ad inventory. What problems do you see arising from this on the brand side?
Yeah, I would actually stretch that point to they've got limited inventory, and you see a lot of groups, Amazon's not one of them, that struggles with limited staffing. I think has come up. A lot of brand marketers I've talked to have had, hey, our spend is growing faster than our support team is growing right now at retail.
And they have thousands of people already working in that field? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And do you have the support to manage 20, 30, $50 million of spend properly with the expectations that these brands have? Sometimes not.
Let me clarify my previous question. So the limited ad inventory, from what we see as a retailer, how can you make more money? And we are clear, it's a monetization game. So everyone is trying to make as much profits out of this as possible, also on the retailer side. So if they run out of inventory, the only way of making more money is inflating the CPCs. Or
adding inventory. Yeah, those are your only options, right?
Inventories, adding inventory is kind of, for most retailers out there, okay, how do we do this? We rely on a third party. Should you give your whole store window away to some third party to put products in, basically giving up your business and letting somebody else populate your page? Not feasible, right? As of today with the current technology. So you have to limit it somehow. And then we see already insane CPCs and CPMs coming in. My question is, to what extent are the brands willing to pay an ever increasing price for these clicks?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think every category is in a different space with the ever increasing price. My guess is you'll get the same, right? A retailer is hesitant to hand over the storefront, and brands are terrified of the same thing. You spoke earlier about, is this a tax? It really becomes a tax if you absolutely cannot run your business because every spot on the page is paid. I think what you'll see is right now, there is a cap on how much retail brands are willing to spend on site and how much inventory is there. We'll hit that at some point. At that point, you're going to have to see, right now, brands are being tasked with, we're paying 2 times 50% increases in CPMs to run this data in the open marketplace. That's going to end up being the outlet, in my opinion, for the increased demand for this data. But it's not going to be sustainable at 50%, 2x CPM premiums. I think at that point you'll hit that, and then we'll have a kind of a reckoning that the space hasn't had yet on price.
Let's get a little more tactical, Jordan. What are practical problems when running a retail media program? And let's maybe not focus on Amazon that much because they are pretty tech savvy and advanced, but there are lots of other retailers, e-commerce platforms that are probably not as mature, including Walmart. From what I hear, it's been a bit clunky in the beginning. Where do you see practical limitations or frustrations when just running a retail media program?
I'm sorry, I lost the Zoom for the last like 2 minutes.
No worries, I can repeat my question. So I said, let's get a little more tactical and let's dig into practical real life problems when running retail media programs, and let's not center too much on Amazon because they're pretty tech savvy and their tech stack is stable. But Walmart, when they launched their own program, it wasn't as stable. We see other retailers coming in and it's not always the most mature tech they're working with. What frustrations are you facing?
Yeah, I think control over delivery is number one. That at the end of the day, it's what brands are looking for. We want to make sure our investment's going where we want to go. If I'm the Aveeno brand, I want to make sure that I'm spending on body lotion and not Aveeno body lotion. I want to make sure I can control my delivery and amp up and down as I see fit to hit my shelf goals. A couple other that we're running into is you'll see we still have some major platforms running on first price instead of second price. It's very difficult to operate that way. It takes additional bandwidth on the brand or agency side to make sure that we're finding floors and getting the most efficient buys. And then there's even
let's quickly dig into that point. The problem is, let's explain this a little bit. A second price auction means that you cannot, if you lower your bid, you're going to lose traffic or you're going to lose ranking, basically. A first price auction means you can reduce your bids and you stay where you are. So you are forced to explore to what extent can you decrease prices and still get the same traffic, right?
Right. Yeah, it adds. Now I've got to add bandwidth on my team to start running tests constantly. And it's just another variable that you've got to control for because the system isn't.
Fun fact, even Google, when you run brand searches on Google, it's supposed to be a second price auction. In reality, it isn't. Our team is doing something called bid trimming. So they pull the bids on brand down and they get the same impression share while paying less. And it's the same thing. You then have a whole bunch of people not doing anything else other than experimenting. Can you save money on the brand? It's not ideal.
There's a couple other pieces that if I back out of search, which is where I kind of started answering that question, operationally, there are a lot of retail media partners that come out and are way over eager to try to circumvent our agency partners. It causes frustration, confusion, and a lot of times it slows down what we can do. And it frankly just disencourages teams.
Means that the retailer approaches you guys directly and doesn't want to talk to the agency?
Yeah, believe it or not, I've had discussions with some retailers in grocery that have explicitly said, like, there's no reason for you to work with an agency here. We can handle it and you should be able to handle it yourself. And as major brands, there's a lot of those just everyday tasks that to run media responsibly. I mean, tagging, setting programs up, paperwork that we just don't want to do. And it's frustrating to have somebody.
As a publisher, Jordan, you want to talk to the money.
Sure. Sure. And we're great with engaging. It's the aggressiveness and taking our partners out of the loop that can cause some frustration. And the other is retail sites are some of the most frequently scraped sites out there. And we kind of consistently get make goods. Hey, we discovered 20% of our traffic this month was a bot that made it through. And now we'll make it up to you next month when maybe our event's over or it's not on strategy. we've got to find another way to go spend this money. So I think it's symptoms of a young channel and of a new space that we're getting through. But those are the kind of things that frustrate people when they first get into retail media.
Let's assume I'm running search ad sponsored products on, I don't know, retailer XYZ, doesn't matter. And I see the Criteo reporting, and I see I've made $1 million in sales. How reliable is this figure?
You had to say Criteo specifically. Let's go with
Citrus,
reporter.
Mabaya,
Whoever
is running retail media programs. It was
in isolation, it's near worthless. Just to see that I've made X without asking the extra questions.
What is the extra question, Jordan?
Click through, view through. First question always in retail search.
But if you pay a CPC on sponsored products, click through is fine, right? That's
click through. Yes, I prefer click through. View through is I've had experience with groups in the past.
You mean attribution? So post view, you mean? Okay.
Yeah, post view.
So basically the question is, what attribution methodology are you guys using? What
three-day click is what we're going towards. And then inside of the walls, that tells you in the display space, you'll always see this kind of exposed or attributed measurement. That's not incremental. It's saw this, bought, spent money on product. The plain ROAS, click ROAS in sponsored products is similar. It's clicked it, bought it. And you can't answer the question.
Jordan, they have a 1 day post view, 14 days post click attribution window. How do you compare performance if you run with Criteo on retailer A, Citrus on retailer B, Crealytics retailer 3?
Yeah, you need internal testing protocols, which is where I was going. Like you can intake almost any measurement from these different partners. They're really not that different. If you can get down to a lot of the work, the analysis I've done, you don't see a massive amount between 3 and 14 day even click. Where you do start to differentiate is internally, can you set up your testing to start teasing out incrementality of that number? You set up, when I turn off this set for these keywords, what happens versus I left it running for these others. And
have you ever done that exercise?
We have.
Any remark on?
Yeah, it's what you would expect. The ratios, let's call them like incrementality rates of if I've got $1 ROAS, how much of that dollar was new business, depending on your category, right? I've heard and seen test results in toys that's category terms as high as 90% incremental, branded terms as low as 10%, which really flips how you're looking at your measurement. And then you can kind of decode what's really happening.
If you run Facebook retargeting, incremental impact is between 1 and 5%. But interesting point. So what would be your recommendation? How would you propose or recommend to make budgeting decisions in retail media?
That's a fascinating one. My philosophy in budgeting decisions, and I'll keep it to retail search to start, is back to what's your goals for distribution? Like what do you expect to own? If I'm the Johnson's brand, what do I expect to own of Walmart shelf for baby shampoo? And then you can do the math. You can have partners tell you, okay, baby shampoo is searched X thousands of times, millions of times per day on this site. You show up in so many of these, here's the amount more you need to show up and what it'll cost you with paid. And you can set like a perfect world budget from there and then trim down by priorities.
Let's talk a little bit about retail media solutions, the retailer side wants in the market, and assuming you've seen quite a few of them. When it comes to sponsored products, imagine you had 3 feature wishes. What would these be?
Yeah, control over delivery is point one all the time. We even have some pretty major partners out there today that don't offer, let's say, negative keyword targeting. There are some basics in control.
Exclusion is not possible.
Right. There are basics in control that if you step back to, we just talked about, hey, maybe certain terms are not very incremental for me. How do I make sure my money doesn't end up there? Is it at the top of the list? Every first question we'll ask. Second, you'll see a lot of new entrants trying to recoup their R&D to build these products pretty quickly. And they do it in the version of high CPC floors. Artificial floor, like there's enough demand in paid search that you're going to get what it's worth. Setting a CPC floor, let's say at $1. If you're looking at a candy brand that's bread and butter is $3 to $4 retails, all of a sudden we're cutting out 25%, a third of their revenue. It's not something that's sustainable when you get people turned off spending in the channel. And then the third is less a requirement, more a question we'll ask every time is, where are you as a retailer balancing between the consumer experience and monetization? How are you thinking about, should I sell 100% of my site, just make it purely biddable? It's probably not the best thing for your consumer because you're going to end up with, I searched for, I don't know, lactose-free milk.
There's a very prominent company, Jordan, who's doing this. And this is Alibaba. They are the only ones who have a different approach. Taobao, for example, they it's a no-fee marketplace. So basically everything ranks according to relevancy and bids. So every single slot across the whole site is always, let's say, sponsored to some extent. What would you think about such a model?
It's a little scary. The concept of every time you show up on a shelf, you're charged, or every time you're clicked.
But you save fees on the other end, right? So there's no marketplace commission. I mean, they just have a different, let's say, revenue model. Yeah, and Amazon has like several elements that contribute to the revenue, with advertising being one. The other guys, it's just, hey, if you want to rank, it's like Google. Google Shopping, if you don't bid, you don't rank. Well, there's some exceptions right now.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. And I, as somebody that's really, really married to the money in, money out, what's it mean? I don't really have a gut answer to tell you, yes, I love it. No, I hate it. It's an interesting concept. If it really does eliminate that extra spend and then more of the money that goes in becomes performance, there's the potential that becomes a really good option for brands and retailers.
Quick question on self-serve versus managed. What's the way to go? Would you prefer to have a self-serve option? Would you always like to have it managed? What's your preference, and how would other brands see that?
Yeah, I think you'll get a pretty consistent answer to this one, that most big brands would prefer self-serve. Couple of reasons for it. One, they can staff it without much hesitation to go and make it function. But maybe the bigger reason is you don't have to ask anybody's permission, which is an incredibly important cog in the how can I go fast system, and how can I test and quickly go and not have to, hey, I go to my account managers, I'd like to try this out. Do you agree with how I'm approaching this thing? You can remove steps and run it how you want to run it. And that's incredibly attractive for major brands.
My probably last question for today is, taking a look at Amazon today, it seems to be a 70, like just roughly 75% sponsored products, roughly 20 something percent sponsored brands, and a tiny little portion on-site display. from their on-site monetization. Taking a look at Walmart, it's probably on the 80% display side, 20% sponsor products. Where is this going? What will the channel mix, in your opinion, look like going forward?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's one that I think a lot of media managers are asking. Like, okay, what's the right mix? Because you're right, there's massive differences on the spectrum, which I think are generally a result of just what that company is used to buying. If you're used to playing in display space, you went there first. If you're in e-commerce, you're a D2C first. That's where you go, and that's where most of Amazon's growth is coming from.
Might also be somehow supply side, right? I mean, Walmart, not such a mature sponsored products technology, but a whole sales force pushing for display investments.
Yeah, and that's who they hired. That's what they knew. So that's what they pushed, which is fine. I think when I think about how the mix should look, I'm less of a here's the pie and more of a what bucket am I going to fill first type of marketer. And to me, that means most brands in most situations should be filling retail search first. And how do you how do you set your goals? How do you operate a system? If you can't get past like how to run retail search really well, you're going to struggle. The next, we talked about the incredible value that's there, the potential value in the on-site, like owned and operated inventory that's unique. So if I'm thinking about bucket one, retail search, once that's full, I move on to, okay, how do I go a little bit further up the consideration set into now I'm present, I'm trying to acquire, maybe it's conquesting activity. And then the third bucket, once those two are filled, is once you start moving into maybe I want to use this data to buy on Pinterest. Maybe I want to buy it open web display through the trade, whatever it is. That's how I'd approach it. And I imagine you're going to see for most brands, the majority of their retail investment end up in search.
So basically, Jordan, what you're saying is make the easy stuff work first. Pick the low-hanging fruits. If you don't make that thing work, don't start with a more complicated one. So yeah, makes total sense. All right. Mark, let me hand this back to you and open up questions for today. And Jordan, thanks a lot. It was a pleasure talking to you. Let's see what questions we're getting.
So we had a few come in. Yeah, great. We had a few come in, and some of these are some really smart questions. Actually, all of them are. Let's just go in order this time. First question, Jordan, let me throw this to you because I think you might have dealt with this, maybe not as much at J&J, but previously. Do you see video ads at retail media, on-site at retail, or specifically as a solution that brings significant value to brands, considering that it's more geared to awareness and consideration and not conversion? So maybe to rephrase that, do you see video ads or do you see any upper funnel ads bringing value to brands within the retail media environment?
Yeah, you're right. That is a smart question. I would think about it as display video. It depends on your category, how leaned in your consumer is to try to get information out. But to your point, if you step back and think about, can you actually get awareness value out of your display and video on these retail properties? Absolutely. I think if you look at the traffic, just the average unique traffic to a Walmart, Target, Amazon, these are just as significant reach drivers as your bigger traditional publishers. People are there every day. It's not always purchase. A lot of times it's research. So I think absolutely there's value there if it's priced properly.
Andy, do you want anything to that, or we can move on to another question? Let's move on then. So Andy, no worries. I got the intent of your head, Bob, even if I didn't hear your voice.
I went on mute.
Andy, I'm going to ask another question that was posted. I'm going to make it a little bit broader. The question asks about tracking capabilities, but I want to talk a little bit more about technology improvements that you're seeing in retail media right now. Do you see that there's more granularity and more transparency coming in? Do you see the trends going to making it more like, let's say, performance advertising, where you're going to be able to get a lot of information out of it? Do you see questions about CLV and incrementality being asked? Can you just talk a little bit about some of the trends that you've seen in the last few years about the improvements of the technology on retail media side?
Referring to me?
Yeah, Andy, I'd like for you to start this time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I saw that question on technology and tracking improvements over time. In my opinion, it's not a tech-related question. It's a question what a retailer is willing to share. So there are all possibilities to share the most granular data. There's also no big obstacle. You could show attributed data. You could show deduped data. The thing here is, in my opinion, that investments correlate with the ROI you see. And as long as brands do not demand more transparency, and as long as the power is rather lying on the retailer side, if you can sell phenomenal KPIs, you will continue doing so. So the best possible advice is be very cautious with the numbers you see, understand what attribution, what tracking mechanisms are being used. Don't take the numbers for granted. There are some working with a post view window. If you do sponsor products with a one-day post view, everyone who will see a product will then somehow convert. So there is no way you're not going to see a phenomenal return. So it's important to understand that what you see is not necessarily what you get. And I think that's just something everyone who's spending a ton of money should keep in mind.
Hey, Jordan, I want to amend the question a little bit for you, because I think there's an interesting point to be made here. When you're evaluating different places to participate in from a retail media perspective, I mean, the obvious answer is going to be the audience is going to be what you chase first and foremost. But if audiences are relatively similar, what other priorities come into play when you're making that determination? Is it transparency in the data? Is there another element that is it ease of use of the tech? How do you make your evaluation?
Yeah, I think transparency is up there, and this will differ for brands, but I like to think of it as if you're an advertiser, your dollar incentivizes the behavior you want to see in the channel. So if you have certain partners that are very transparent, they're helping you run your tests, you feel comfortable that your money's being spent the way you want it to be spent, you incentivize that behavior in the marketplace by budget up. It's just not that easy right now. We have a lot of brands that are still foot to the fire. We had salespeople sign up for big, and I'm not talking about Johnson & Johnson or Hershey specifically, but you get salespeople into a room that haven't bought media before that sign up for something that's maybe a bit over the top. And then you're pushed with your job becomes less about getting them to act the way you want and more about just getting the money through.
It's also something that is changing rapidly as the market is maturing right now. I'll give you an example. It was probably 6-7 years ago that some European players started the retail media game. And in the very early days, they sold banners for time frames like, hey, you can be on that page for 2 weeks and the price is 150,000. And they said, wow, I get this banner for 2 weeks for only 150,000. And if you then calculated the CPM, it was like 50x what he would have paid on Facebook. So it was just clear that there were buyers who had no clue how media buying would work. And this is something that doesn't work any longer. And going forward, as the budgets are now so substantial, any retailer who's betting to game the brands and kind of inflate the numbers, I don't think that this is a long-term play. And the smart guys are well aware and they know they have to provide value to the brands.
I think we'll end it there. It's a good way to actually bring the loop full circle, right? We started off by talking about, is this a tax or is this an opportunity? And when we look back at the window from where it became, where it all started, these ideas of untrackable banners, it was ultimately back then truly a tax. I think we can all agree that it maybe has moved further away from that tax and there is more opportunity in the system, but smart, cynical retailers and brands will recognize that tax element may still live there. I want to thank both of you guys for joining today and putting together this webinar. Jordan, especially thanks to you for spending some time with us to share your knowledge and expertise. I'll invite everybody in the audience to share. We're going to be sending out this video here in the next couple of days. Invite everyone to share the New York No-Go message about retail media and getting deeper and smarter in the practices of data and strategy for site optimization. And we'll look forward to seeing all of you at the next event. Thanks everyone for joining. Again, thanks Andy and Jordan.